Westerners tend to view religion as something intensely personal and private, and not as a cultural phenomenon. For example, Christianity is supracultural, above the culture, in that it allows people to live, dress, and eat in accordance with the culture in which they exist. Christians in India, for example, do not have to dress like Christians in America. This is not so with Islam. In Islam, there is no secular realm that is free of religion. Islam regulates every aspect of life to the point that religion, politics, and culture are inseparable. Islam is thus fueled by a subtle form of racism in which 7th century Arab culture is to be imposed upon all other cultures. Here are some examples of the cultural nature of Islam. Take political structure, for example. The tribalism of 7th century Arabia is the political structure sanctioned by the Quran. The chief has absolute authority. There is no concept of civil rights. This principle is reflected today in the reality that all Islamic countries are ruled by dictators, and civil liberties like freedom of speech and religion simply do not exist. Or consider prayer. A Muslim is required to pray 5 times a day toward Mecca. This is a symbol of the underlying cultural imperialism that lies at the heart of Islam. Think of it. What if all Russian Orthodox throughout the world were required to pray toward Moscow? Or if all Roman Catholics were required to face Rome when they prayed? What if evangelical Christians were required to pray toward Jerusalem? Such requirements would imply a cultural attachment to the focal point of prayer. Or consider pilgrimage. A Muslim is required, despite the hardship and cost, to make a pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia once in his lifetime. Again, what if all Christians were required to go to Rome once in their lifetimes? And the dietary laws. The only foods allowable are those that were acceptable in 7th century Arabia. Women are a best example of the cultural nature of Islam. What an illiterate, nomadic tribeswoman wore in the desert in 7th century Arabia is what is mandated for Muslim women today. The plight of women in Islamic countries today is despicable. They can be kept prisoners in their homes. They cannot appear in public without a covering. They are usually denied the right to vote. They are often denied anything more than a rudimentary education. In strict Islamic countries, women are generally treated as subhuman. Surah 434 of the Quran says, and I quote, "Men are the managers of the affairs of women. Those women who are rebellious, admonish them, banish them to their couches, and beat them." Yes, beat them. And that brings us to punishment, another cultural aspect of Islam. Cruel and unusual punishment is practiced throughout the Islamic world. Incarceration without due process is common. Punishments often include torture, the cutting off of body parts such as hands, ears, and tongues, the gouging out of eyes, beheading, and public flogging, all representative of 7th century Arabian culture. The Quran specifically commands that those who disobey Allah are to be tortured. Time magazine recently presented a chilling summary of the cultural nature of Islam as is evidenced in the so-called moderate Islamic nation of Saudi Arabia. Here's what Time wrote. Despite the modernization that took place after the discovery of oil reserves in 1938, Saudi Arabia remains a land where rigid religious and traditional values are strictly enforced. Cinemas and discos are outlawed. Men and women are separated in banks, schools, and fast food restaurants. Women must wear veils and are forbidden to drive. Public decency police, known as mutawa, comb shopping malls, searching for women whose loose scarves reveal a curl of hair and forcing store owners to shut during prayer times. Unforgiving Saudi justice is on view after the main prayer every Friday, when a swordsman beheads blindfolded murderers, sorcerers, drug smugglers, and other criminals in the capital city Riyadh's Chop Chop Square. End of quote from Time magazine. Islam is a typical works religion centered around a false god. Let's just talk about the spiritual nature of Islam for a moment. As I say, it's a typical work salvation religion centered around a false god. Its fundamental tenets deny the heart of the Christian gospel, revealing its demonic origin. Take the Quran, for example. As I have already pointed out, the holy book of Islam is riddled with contradictions. Consider, for example, what it says about creation. In one place, it asserts that everything was created by Allah in the twinkling of an eye. Elsewhere, it says that the time period of the creation was 2 days. In another place, it says it's 4 days. In another place, 6 days. In another place, of 1 day, equaling 1,000 years. And finally, it says it took 50,000 years. That's a total of 6 different time periods for the creation. The Quran contains many scientific errors. A crude example is found in Surah 18, 8 through 86, where it says that Alexander the Great followed the setting of the sun and discovered that it went down in the waters of a muddy spring. Many Arabian fairy tales about genies are also contained in the Quran, and the book is also full of historical errors. It presents Mary, the mother of Jesus, as the sister of Moses and Aaron, obviously confusing her with their sister Miriam. The Noahic flood is placed in the time of Moses, and the claim is made that one of Noah's sons refused to enter the ark and was drowned. The Quran also pictures Abraham as offering Ishmael as a sacrifice in Mecca, whereas the biblical account has Abraham offering Isaac on Mount Moriah in the area that would later become the heart of Jerusalem. And then consider God. This is very important, folks, because so often today you hear people saying, well, they worship one God, we worship one God, the Jews worship one God, therefore we all worship the same God. Not so at all. The Quran asserts that the God of Islam is the God of Christians and Jews. It says that in Surah 29, 46. Nothing could be further from the truth. The God of Islam, Allah, is most definitely not the God of the Bible. Allah is presented in the Quran as an autocratic ruler who is aloof and arbitrary. Allah is unknowable, whereas the God of the Bible is knowable. Allah is impersonal, unlike the personal God the Scriptures reveal. Allah is Unitarian, whereas the God of the Bible is Trinitarian. Here is what the Quran says about the God of the Bible. I'm quoting Surah 4, 171. Believe in Allah and say not Trinity. Cease. It is better for you. Allah is only one God. Far is it removed from his transcendent majesty that he should have a son. Allah is capricious, whereas the true God is trustworthy. And Allah is never, ever, anywhere in the Quran presented as a God of love, which is the essence of the nature of the one and only true God. As far as Jesus is concerned, the Quran denies point blank that Jesus was the Son of God. You'll find that in Surah 112, verses 2 through 3. It also denies his atoning sacrifice by claiming that he never died. A substitute died for him on the cross, claims the Quran. Jesus was translated to heaven, like Enoch, according to the Quran, where he will remain until he returns to kill all pigs, destroy all crosses, and convert the world to Islam. Jesus will marry, reign for 40 years, then die, and be buried next to Muhammad in Medina. Jesus is characterized in the Quran as nothing more than an apostle of Allah. One of the strange things about Islam is there's no concept of sin. That's right. There is no concept of sin in Islam, and therefore no need for forgiveness. Shame replaces sin. Everything is a matter of honor versus dishonor. In the Muslim view, man does not need redemption. He only needs some guidance so that he might develop the inherently pure nature which the Creator has endowed him. If he will be faithful in his prayers, almsgiving, and fasting, God is likely to overlook his sins and usher him into paradise. Ethics. Well, the situation in Islam, the situation determines the appropriate action, not a standard of right or wrong. As an example, Al-Ghazali, one of the greatest Muslim theologians who lived from 1058 to 1111, wrote these words, "Know that a lie is not wrong in itself. If a lie is the only way of obtaining a good result, it is permissible. We must lie when truth leads to unpleasant results." The Quran also sanctions revenge. In Surah 2, 194 it says, "If anyone transgresses against you, transgress likewise against him." And then, as far as salvation is concerned, Islam, as I said before, is a religion of works. One obtains favor with Allah by performing the 5 pillars of the faith, and those are, first, reciting the creed that there is one God, Allah, and his prophet is Muhammad. Second, praying 5 times a day toward Mecca. Third, giving alms to the poor. Fourth, fasting from sunrise to sunset 1 month a year during the month of Ramadan. And fifth, making a pilgrimage to Mecca. Another way to reach paradise is to die fighting for Allah.